What happens when a man who has spent years avoiding the spotlight suddenly walks straight into the brightest one he can find and decides he's done staying silent? That's the question that sent shockwaves through the studio of The View long before the cameras even powered on. And before we dive into this moment, this confrontation that would leave everyone in the building speechless, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and drop a comment to keep these incredible stories coming your way. Because what unfolded on that stage is something no one expected. Not the producers, not the hosts, and definitely not Whoopi Goldberg. The morning began unusually quiet. New York had one of those soft, gray dawns where the skyline looked like it was holding its breath. Inside the studio, the staff walked briskly, clipping on mics, adjusting lights, straightening cue cards. But there was a nervousness running under everything, a shiver of something unspoken traveling from one crew member to the next. They all knew who was coming. They all knew what had happened the last time he sat on this stage. Johnny Depp. Even saying his name in that room stirred something. Some whispered anticipation, some uncomfortable memory, some unsettled conflict left behind from that infamous episode years earlier. But no one talked openly about it. Not yet. The studio air felt thick, like the moment before thunder cracks. And somewhere deep in the building, hidden from the main backstage traffic, Johnny stood alone in a dressing room with the door slightly ajar, staring into a mirror that reflected someone who looked both familiar and foreign. His hair hung casually, loose around his shoulders. A pair of tinted glasses rested on the bridge of his nose, and beneath them, eyes that carried whole decades of untold stories. Not the eyes of a man ready for a scripted TV chat, more like someone preparing to face a ghost. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Depp?" A young assistant poked her head in. "We're ready for sound check in 5. The hosts will be arriving soon." Johnny nodded slowly, almost as if he needed that reminder to return from someplace far away. "Thank you," he said softly. His voice held a rasp that felt worn from long nights of thinking rather than talking. As she stepped away, Johnny exhaled. He wasn't here to promote a movie. He wasn't here for an apology tour. He wasn't here to charm anyone with humor or soften the room with one of his famously disarming smiles. He was here because of something Whoopi Goldberg had said. Something she'd refused to retract. Something he had carried with him far longer than he ever admitted to anyone. He reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded a small, worn-out note, scribbled handwriting, just a few lines. Words that had been said about him during a darker chapter of his life. Words that cut deep even if the world had moved on. He stared at them, quietly, coolly, almost sorrowfully. Then he folded the paper again and placed it back inside his pocket. And with that, he walked toward the stage. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the building, Whoopi Goldberg entered through a side corridor with her usual mix of confidence and indifference. She exchanged brief greetings with the crew, cracked a joke with a camera operator, and slipped into her own dressing room. But beneath her practiced calm was something else. Irritation, maybe even annoyance. Because she, too, knew exactly why Johnny Depp was returning. And she wasn't thrilled. She tossed her bag onto a small sofa and sat down heavily, letting out a frustrated sigh. "They really doing this?" she muttered to herself, rubbing her forehead. "Of all the guests today, they bring him back? After all that mess?" Another host, Sarah Haynes, peeked in concerned. "You good?" Whoopi shrugged. "I'm fine. Just don't want this turning into some circus. The internet's already clowning." Sarah stepped closer. "Just maybe keep it cool today? Producers aren't looking for a repeat of." "I know what they're not looking for," Whoopi cut in, her tone sharp but not angry. "Out of breath, maybe. Pressured. I'll handle it." But the truth was, she wasn't sure she could handle it. Not this time. The last time Johnny was on the show, tensions had flared so unexpectedly that even the producers had trouble containing it. And since then, small remarks, offhand comments about trials, interviews, or rumors had been sprinkled into episodes. Most forgotten. Except one. Johnny hadn't forgotten. The studio audience began filing in, faces lit with excitement, phones held high, whispers spreading like wildfire as rumors leaked through the line. "Johnny Depp is here today." Multiple people gasped. Someone squealed. Someone said, no way, are you serious?" Another murmured, "What if something goes down?" The audience coordinator quickly shushed them and moved them along, but the energy, the electric tension, was impossible to hide. Backstage, Johnny reached the edge of the set. He watched as the hosts gathered in their usual positions. Joy read a note card. Sunny adjusted her earpiece. Whoopi glanced around the room until her eyes landed on Johnny across the space. Their gazes locked. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. It wasn't the look of two celebrities crossing paths. It was the look of two people with unfinished business. The floor manager clapped his hands loudly. Places. We're living 30. Cameras flicked on with a soft, mechanical hum. Stage lights brightened overhead. Hosts took their seats. Johnny remained behind the wall, waiting for the cue. And Whoopi straightened herself like someone bracing for impact. In the control room, producers hovered over screens with tight jaws and silent prayers that today wouldn't implode on live television. Roll in 5, 4, 3, 2. The theme music blasted through the speakers, the crowd cheered, and the camera panned across the table as Joy kicked off the show with her usual warm tone. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to The View. The audience roared again. And then Joy delivered the line that flipped the atmosphere in the studio upside down. We have a very special guest joining us today. Someone who hasn't been here for a long time, but is finally back, Johnny Depp. The crowd erupted into applause, loud, disorganized, almost frantic. Several people jumped to their feet. Someone screamed. A handful of others murmured, "Oh my God," while a few exchanged glances that said exactly what they were thinking. This is about to get wild. Johnny stepped onto the stage. Not rushed. Not smiling. Not trying to warm the room. He walked like a man with purpose. A man who didn't come here to be handled or babysat. A man ready to speak. The applause rose as he approached the table. Sunny extended a polite hand. Joy gave him a nod. Sarah smiled warmly. Whoopi didn't move. She sat with her hands clasped, her expression unreadable. A mixture of caution and defiance tightened the corners of her mouth. Johnny took the empty seat directly across from her. For a moment, silence fell. A silence the microphones caught perfectly. Then Joy cleared her throat. "Johnny, welcome back." Johnny nodded, but his eyes never left Whoopi. "Thank you for having me," he said calmly. "Been a long time." Sunny jumped in quickly, hoping to ease tension. "So, Johnny, you've been working on new projects, spending time traveling, living." Johnny lifted a hand, stopping her. "I'll get to that," he said gently. "I promise. But if you don't mind, I'd like to start with something else." The hosts froze. The audience stiffened. Even the producers leaned forward. Joy hesitated. "Johnny, we usually start with." "I know," Johnny replied. "But today is different." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Every syllable carried the kind of weight that pulled the entire room in. He reached into his jacket pocket. A rustle of paper broke the stillness. Whoopi's eyes narrowed. A pulse tightened in her throat. Johnny unfolded the note, placed it gently on the table, and pushed it forward until it rested inches from Whoopi's hand. "This," he said quietly. "Let's start with this." The studio audience reacted instantly, a ripple of confusion, shock, curiosity. Whoopi didn't touch the paper. She didn't need to. She recognized it. Every stroke of handwriting, every harsh word. She remembered the moment she said those things. She remembered the episode. The headlines. The online reaction. The consequences. "Johnny," she said slowly, steadying her voice, "we're not doing this here." He leaned forward slightly. "We are." Joy tried to jump in. "Maybe we can." Johnny didn't break eye contact. "For years, people have talked about me, about what they think happened, about who I am. But this, Whoopi, this was personal. And I never got the chance to ask you why." Whoopi's jaw tightened. "I already addressed that comment years ago," she countered, frustration creeping into her tone. "You know how live TV works. Things get twisted. I explained, people misunderstood." Johnny shook his head. "No, you didn't address it to me." The room went still. Sarah looked from Johnny to Whoopi, unsure whether to intervene. Sunny whispered, "Oh God," under her breath, barely audible to her mic, but the audience caught the tension instantly. Johnny tapped the paper lightly. His voice grew softer, but somehow even more intense. "This hurt," he said. "Not because of what you called me, but because you said it at a time when the world was already swallowing me alive. I didn't expect compassion. I didn't expect you to defend me. I didn't expect anything, really. But I didn't expect that from you." The audience gasped in unison, a wave of murmurs swirling across the studio. Whoopi's chest rose and fell slowly. She stared at him, not angry, not yet, but conflicted. Maybe even caught off guard by how direct he was. "Look," she said finally, "if you came here to make a scene." "No," Johnny replied. I came here because every time someone looks at me and brings up that chapter of my life, I remember your words more than almost anyone else's. Whoopi's eyes softened for a split second. A flash of guilt, maybe. A flicker of something real. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. You want an apology? She asked. The audience perked up instantly, leaning forward, gripping armrests, sensing something explosive about to unfold. Johnny didn't answer immediately. He took a breath. Calm. Controlled. Heavy. I want the truth, he said. Yours. Mine. All of it. Every host at the table fell silent. Every crew member in the building stopped moving. Every viewer watching at home would soon replay this moment over and over again, wondering how a daytime talk show turned into a cinematic showdown in seconds. And as the tension thickened, as the lights burned hotter, as Whoopi shifted in her seat preparing to respond, the broadcast cut to a scheduled commercial break. But the moment, the stare, the confrontation hanging in the air, none of that paused. Not for a second. The studio erupted the moment the red commercial break light blinked on. Crew members rushed onto the stage. Producers whispered urgently. Assistants moved props. But the air, thick, charged, dangerous, remained exactly where it was as Johnny and Whoopi sat frozen across from one another like two duelists waiting for the bell. Johnny leaned back slightly, adjusting the ring on his middle finger, but his gaze stayed fixed on Whoopi. Not hostile. Not challenging. Just unwavering. Like he needed her to understand something he hadn't yet said aloud. Across from him, Whoopi inhaled deeply, muttering something to herself under her breath. She rubbed her temples, rubbed her eyes, rubbed away whatever emotion she didn't want leaking through. A producer crouched beside her, whispering intensely. Whoopi, this is heating up fast. We need you to keep it steady. Stay focused on the talking points we gave. She cut him off with a sharp glance. I know what I'm doing. The producer swallowed. Okay. Just don't escalate. We can't have another viral explosion. You think I want that? She asked coolly. No one answered. Meanwhile, another producer approached Johnny. She moved carefully, like approaching a dangerous animal. Out of respect, out of caution, out of fear she might say something wrong. Johnny, when we come back, maybe we shift into a lighter topic? Your new film, or the festival you just... Johnny turned his head just slightly toward her. No. The word was quiet but final. I'm not here to play pretend, he added. Not today. The producer let out a nervous breath. We understand, but we need to protect the show. He met her eyes. Calm, steady, unshakable. I'm not here to destroy your show, he said softly. But I'm also not here to bury the truth. The producer had no reply. She simply nodded and stepped away, whispering into her headset as the rest of the crew snapped into formation. The countdown began. Back in 30, 29, 28. The audience settled, some whispering frantically, others simply staring at the stage like they had front-row seats to an unfolding storm. At the table, Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Sunny clasped her hands to stop them from trembling. Joy wiped her forehead discreetly with a tissue. The only two people who didn't move? Johnny. Whoopi. Back in 5, 4, 3, 2. The show snapped live again. And for a second, neither of them spoke. Joy tried to start. She forced a small laugh, thin, shaky, artificial. So, welcome back, everyone. We were just discussing. But Johnny cut in, unexpectedly polite. Joy, he murmured. If it's all right, I'd like to continue. She froze. She looked at the producers behind the glass. They didn't nod. They didn't shake their heads. They stared helplessly. Johnny turned back to Whoopi. You asked me, he said quietly, if I came here for an apology. The truth is no. I didn't. Whoopi didn't flinch, though something behind her eyes flickered. A question, confusion, maybe relief, or maybe something far more complicated. Johnny continued, slow and deliberate. When I heard what you said about me back then, it wasn't the insult that stuck. I've been insulted before. More times than I can count. A few audience members nodded instinctively. What stayed with me, he said, was the idea that someone I respected, someone I watched growing up, someone who knew what the media machine can do to a person, would join the pylon without ever asking me one simple question. He leaned forward slightly. Is it true? The room went dead still. Whoopi opened her mouth, but Johnny raised a hand, not to silence her, but to finish. I went through hell, he said, voice tightening. You know that. The world witnessed it. Some laughed. Some took pleasure in it. Some used it for clicks, ratings, jokes. And maybe you didn't mean what you said. Maybe it was just another moment on another show during another chaotic news cycle. He tapped the paper again. But those words lived with me. Whoopi exhaled, long and slow. Then she spoke. Johnny, look. I remember that episode. I remember the conversation. And I remember thinking the whole world was reacting emotionally, with half the facts missing. I said what I said because that's what I believed at the time. Johnny didn't blink. She continued. And when the trial later revealed things were more complicated than anyone thought, I clarified it. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not directly to you. But I did. She leaned back, folding her arms. I didn't come into this job trying to hurt people. But I speak my mind. I always have. That's what this show is. Johnny's face didn't change. You've spoken your mind for decades, he replied. But today, I'm asking you to speak your heart. A murmur rippled through the audience. Whoopi narrowed her eyes, not in anger, but in uncertainty. She wasn't used to being asked that on live TV. She wasn't used to being the one on the defensive. She wasn't used to someone pushing back without fear. Sunny gently cut in, her voice soft. Whoopi, maybe it's worth explaining what you meant. People online still debate that clip. Whoopi turned to her, then back to Johnny. You want honesty? She asked. Yes, Johnny replied. She sighed. Her hands unclasped. Her posture changed, slightly less guarded. When I said those words, she began, choosing each syllable carefully, I wasn't attacking you as a person. I was commenting on the situation. The chaos. The mess. I thought you were part of that chaos. But I didn't realize how much weight my words would add to what you were already dealing with. Her throat tightened. I'm not perfect, Johnny. I've said things on this show that I regret. Things I'd take back if I could. Johnny listened silently. But I didn't think, not for 1 second, that my words would break you. And if they did, she paused. Then I'm sorry. Gasps erupted through the audience. Some clapped. Some stared with wide eyes. Some looked like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Johnny absorbed her words without reacting. Not yet. His face softened slightly, but only slightly. That's the first honest thing you've said about it, he murmured. Whoopi's eyebrows raised. It's not the first time I've tried to explain myself. No, Johnny agreed. It's just the first time you said it to me. There it was again, the weight, the truth, the rawness of something that had lingered between them for years. The hosts exchanged nervous glances. Sarah whispered, This is unreal, barely audible. Joy pinched the bridge of her nose like she needed a moment to process. Sunny leaned in, intuitive, gentle. Johnny, what is it about her words that stayed with you all these years? Johnny's eyes flickered downward for the first time. Not ashamed. Not uncertain. Just remembering. You want the truth? He asked, almost to himself. Sunny nodded. Johnny lifted his chin slowly and looked back at Whoopi. When everyone turned their backs, when studios dropped me, when people I thought were friends vanished, I kept thinking, this is temporary. Someone will stand up. Someone will say this doesn't feel right. He exhaled. And when you spoke, I realized no one was coming. Not for me. A wave of sympathy washed over the audience. Several people placed hands over their mouths. Some whispered things like, poor guy, or that's heartbreaking. Whoopi's expression wavered. Guilt? Remorse? Defensiveness? All of it tangled together. Johnny, she said softly, I never meant to be the final straw. But you were, he replied gently. Silence. Actual, suffocating silence. Sarah finally spoke. Then why come back here? Why put yourself through this again? Johnny took a breath, steadying himself. Because truth matters, he said. And closure matters. And whether people love me or hate me, they should hear this part of the story too. He looked at Whoopi again. You have a powerful voice. When you say something, it echoes. It shapes opinions. It shapes narratives. It shapes people. Whoopi swallowed. Hard. And when you said what you said, Johnny continued, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was tired. Bone tired. Like the life had been wrung out of me. He paused. And I don't blame you for all of it. Not entirely. But you became part of the story I never asked to be in. Whoopi looked away for a moment, blinking quickly. Johnny, you have no idea how much I get attacked online every single day for saying things people don't like. You know how it is. You know this industry eats you alive. I do, Johnny said softly. That's why I'm here. She looked at him again. And what do you want now? She asked. Johnny didn't hesitate. I want us to talk. I want us to stand in front of the world and say, two people can disagree, hurt each other, break each other, and still come face to face without tearing each other apart. The audience let out a soft, collective sound, like a sigh mixed with hope. Whoopi studied him, truly studied him, for the first time that morning. Maybe, she said quietly, that's something worth doing. Johnny nodded. But before they could go deeper, an unexpected voice cut across the table. Joy. Hold on, she said, hands raised. Johnny, Whoopi, this is powerful, yes. But we also need to address something else. This isn't just about personal pain. This is about the media, the industry, and how all of us contributed to the storm. Sunny followed. Exactly. It wasn't just one comment. It was years of coverage. Headlines. Assumptions. Narratives pushed without evidence. Sarah added, and maybe today is the beginning of rewriting that. Johnny glanced at them. Whoopi looked uncertain. The audience leaned forward like they could feel the ground shifting beneath the conversation. Johnny spoke one more time, voice low and steady. Then let's rewrite it. Whoopi blinked. And before she could respond, the director's voice cut in loudly. Commercial break in 5, 4, 3. But this time, the tension wasn't explosive. It was transformative. The kind that hinted part 3 wouldn't be a confrontation, but an unraveling, a revelation, a reckoning. When the second commercial break ended, the audience returned to their seats with a kind of hushed urgency. Everyone sensing what was coming, everyone knowing instinctively that the air inside that studio was about to split open again. But this time, the energy felt different. Less like an explosion waiting to erupt, more like a truth long buried clawing its way to the surface. The music faded. The cameras glided in. Johnny Depp and Whoopi Goldberg sat in the same positions, but their postures had shifted. Johnny no longer leaned forward like a man ready to reel in years of unresolved pain. Whoopi no longer pressed her hands together in guarded defiance. Instead, the two seemed suspended in a fragile moment of potential understanding, one that hadn't existed between them in years. Joy opened the show segment again, but her voice was softer. Not timid, but respectful, like she realized the stage had become something other than a talk show desk. Welcome back, she said, offering a small smile no one truly returned. Before the break, we began a conversation, an important one. And we want to continue it. Sarah nodded. It's rare that we get moments like this on live television. Moments where two people really sit down and confront what's been weighing on them. Sunny leaned in gently, looking at both Johnny and Whoopi. So maybe this is the time to go deeper. For clarity. For truth. For understanding. Johnny breathed in slowly, as though preparing for something heavier than the room anticipated. Then he gestured toward Whoopi, not aggressively, not insistently, but as if inviting her to take the first step. Whoopi shifted in her seat. I said I was sorry, she reminded him quietly. Johnny nodded. And I heard you. Truly. But that's not enough for you, she added. Not as an accusation, but as an observation spoken from somewhere softer. Johnny paused. It's not that it's not enough. It's that there are layers. Things that weren't spoken. Things that weren't understood. Whoopi stared at him, uncertain. What layers? He reached into his jacket. The audience collectively gasped, expecting another piece of paper, another accusation, another weapon forged from the past. Instead, he pulled out nothing. Just breathed. There was a moment, he began, when everything in my life collapsed. Not metaphorically. Actually, I remember waking up one morning, checking my phone, and seeing thousands of messages, texts, emails, headlines, calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Panic everywhere. Noise everywhere. Whole nations treating me like a symbol instead of a human being. He swallowed. And then I saw your clip. Whoopi looked down. It wasn't the worst thing anyone said, Johnny admitted. Not even close. But it was the moment I felt truly alone. Because I thought, if someone like you sees me as guilty before the truth even comes out, then maybe it doesn't matter what the truth actually is. A wave of sorrow swept through the audience, visible in the soft gasps, the subtle head shakes, the hands clutching programs or covering mouths. Whoopi didn't speak yet. Johnny continued. There's something people forget, he said. Behind every headline, every viral clip, every meme, there's a person. A person who goes home alone, who sits in silence, who hears the echo of their reputation crumbling faster than they can breathe. His voice cracked barely but undeniably. And for a moment, he whispered, I believed the world would never see me again. Whoopi's throat tightened. Her eyes softened with something deeper than guilt, recognition, perhaps. Understanding. Johnny, she said, struggling with the words. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know what was happening behind those headlines. All I saw was a chaotic, messy story, one that the whole world was talking about, and I reacted. Maybe too quickly. Maybe without thinking. But it wasn't personal. Johnny smiled faintly, and for the first time, it wasn't bitter. It was sad, maybe even relieved. I know, he said. I know it wasn't personal. But it became personal to me. Sonny spoke gently. Whoopi, when you look at Johnny now, knowing what he went through, do you still stand by what you said back then? Whoopi exhaled slowly, her hands trembling for the first time on camera. She caught herself, placing them firmly on the table. No, she said honestly. Not the way I said it. Not the way it was interpreted. Not the way it hurt him. Johnny nodded slowly. But, Whoopi added, voice firming, I need to say something too. Johnny gestured, granting her the floor. Whoopi turned her chair slightly, facing him directly. The studio lights caught her expression, raw, conflicted, honest. You're not the only one who's been torn apart by the public, she said. I've spent decades being misquoted, attacked, dragged, threatened. When I speak, half the world twists it before I finish the sentence. I grew thick skin because I had to. Maybe too thick. Thick enough that I forgot not everyone survives this industry the same way. Johnny's eyes softened. Whoopi continued. When you were going through your storm, I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd weather it because you were Johnny Depp, the guy with 1 million fans, 100 movies, a legacy bigger than any rumor. I didn't think my comment would slice you the way it did. She paused. And that's on me. That's something I have to own. The audience murmured, some stunned, some moved, some emotional. Johnny leaned forward, his voice warm but steady. And I appreciate that, he said. More than you know. But I also have to say this, Whoopi added. You weren't just in a personal crisis. You were part of a cultural firestorm. A movement bigger than both of us. Emotions were high. People were scared, angry, confused. And no matter what side people took, no matter what they believed, someone was going to get hurt. Johnny bowed his head slightly, acknowledging her point. Then Whoopi did something unexpected. She extended her hand. Not for a handshake. Not for a truce. But for understanding. Maybe, she said softly, we were both swallowed by the same storm. Johnny stared at her hand for a long, quiet moment. The audience held their breath. The hosts looked on with wide eyes. Even the producers behind the glass leaned closer. Johnny then placed his hand atop hers. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't staged. It wasn't for the camera. It was for them. Just them. A moment of connection that felt almost cinematic. Whoopi inhaled shakily, visibly fighting tears. I'm not your enemy, Johnny. And I never wanted to be. I know, he whispered. And then Sarah spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. This right here is what the world doesn't see. Two people who were once on opposite sides finding a way back to something human. Sonny nodded. Maybe this is the real lesson, that we're all more than the narratives built around us. Joy leaned in. But there's something else here. Something we need to talk about. The bigger picture. Johnny looked at her. Whoopi straightened. Joy continued. The media didn't just report your story. They weaponized it. Social platforms turned it into currency. People turned your pain into entertainment. Both of you were casualties of that. Johnny's jaw clenched. Whoopi's lips pressed together. Sonny added, we can't pretend we didn't play a part too. Shows like this one, we became part of the machine. Maybe unwillingly, maybe accidentally, maybe just trying to keep up with the noise. But it happened. A hush swept the studio, an uncomfortable truth settling into the air. Sarah whispered, so the question is what now? Johnny breathed deeply, then spoke with a conviction that resonated through every corner of the room. Now, he said, we tell the truth. Not about the case. Not about the trial. Not about the rumors or the headlines. But about what it means to be human in a world that forgets that celebrities are human. Whoopi nodded. We start a conversation that isn't about sides or blame or outrage, but about responsibility. Sonny leaned in. And healing. Joy added, and accountability. The audience burst into applause. Not loud, not wild, but emotional. Moved. Grateful. But something still lingered. Something unspoken. Something heavy. Johnny sensed it. Whoopi felt it too. Sonny softly asked, Johnny, is there something else you need to say? Something you've been holding back? Johnny hesitated. A long, breathless pause filled the studio. Then he looked directly at Whoopi. There is, he said. Whoopi braced herself. Johnny's voice lowered, fragile but firm. You weren't the only one whose words hurt me, he said. But you were the only one. I wanted to hear say they didn't mean it. A heartbeat. Then another. Whoopi's eyes welled. Then hear me now, she whispered. I didn't mean it. Johnny inhaled, sharp, emotional, a release years in the making. Thank you, he said. Joy exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Sarah wiped a tear discreetly. Sunny placed a hand on her chest. The audience broke into a soft wave of applause. And then Johnny added something no one expected. But we're not finished. Whoopi blinked. We're not. Johnny shook his head slowly. Because there's something the world needs to hear, he said. Something that happened behind the scenes, something no one knows about. The hosts froze. The audience gasped. Whoopi stared in alarm. And Johnny, voice steady as a cliff face, said, The day after that episode aired, someone from this show called me. The studio erupted, people leaning forward, whispering, tension clawing back into the room. Whoopi stuttered. Called you? Who? Johnny looked across the table. And the truth he was about to reveal would change everything. The room seemed to fold inward on itself as Johnny's words settled across the table. Every heartbeat in the studio synced into one heavy, expectant rhythm. The hosts leaned closer. The audience leaned forward. Even the cameras, humming faintly as they recorded, felt like they edged in, eager to catch every syllable of the revelation that hovered in the air. Whoopi stared at Johnny as if he had just opened a door she didn't know existed. Someone from this show called you? She repeated slowly, like the words tasted foreign. Johnny nodded. The morning after the episode aired. Joy exchanged glances with the producers behind the glass. Sarah blinked rapidly. Sunny tensed, crossing her arms tightly against her chest. Who was it? Whoopi asked, her voice lower, more cautious. Johnny looked down, exhaled, then raised his head again. I wasn't going to say this. Not today. Maybe not ever. But if we're being honest, truly honest, then the full story deserves to be told. Every eye in the building fixed on him. I received a call from someone on your team, he said. Someone who wasn't supposed to speak to me. Someone who felt guilty. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably. What did they say? Johnny hesitated, not dramatically, but thoughtfully, as if reliving a moment that still pulsed in his memory. They told me, he said quietly, that what happened on air wasn't supposed to happen. That you were upset about something unrelated that day. That producers wanted to stir up strong conversation, because ratings were dipping. That the story was so big, they leaned into it. A ripple of discomfort flashed across the hosts' faces. And they told me that you regretted it the second the cameras cut. Whoopi's breath caught. Joy whispered, Who would have said that? Sarah looked stunned. Someone from our staff called you? Sunny placed a hand over her mouth. But Whoopi. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes lowered. Her entire expression changed, shock giving way to something else. Something like recognition. It hit her before she could hide it. She knew. Not the exact person. Not the exact words. But the truth inside the truth. She closed her eyes. Oh my God, she whispered. I know who it was. Johnny watched her carefully. I never revealed their name, he said softly. I still won't. They reached out because they believed I deserved to know the context. They weren't blaming you. They weren't defending you either. They were human. Whoopi swallowed. Her voice trembled. Johnny, why didn't you ever tell me this? Johnny leaned forward slightly. Because back then I was drowning. And when someone reaches into water you can barely breathe in, you don't ask why. You just take the hand. She wiped beneath her glasses, quietly, discreetly, but visibly emotional. Joy interjected gently. This is bigger than a disagreement. Bigger than a comment. Bigger than any of us realized. Sarah nodded slowly. The industry, producers, media pressure. It pushes people into moments they don't choose. Sunny added. And those moments follow people for years. Johnny's gaze softened. This isn't about blaming the show, he said. And it's not about vindication. Not for me. Not anymore. Whoopi met his eyes, vulnerable in a way that surprised even herself. Then why bring this up now? Because the world deserves to see the whole picture, Johnny replied, his voice steady. Not the polished version. Not the viral clips. But the truth between two people who were pushed into a storm they never asked for. He paused, then added. And because you deserve to know that someone on your own team saw your humanity, even when I didn't. The tension dissolved, not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a long-held breath finally being released. Whoopi nodded, tears threatening but held back. I appreciate that. Truly. Johnny offered a soft, almost tender smile. And I appreciate you listening. Joy leaned over the table, her voice full of warmth. This is one of the most honest conversations we've had on this show in years. Sarah exhaled shakily. I think everyone needed this. Sunny nodded. Maybe we needed this more than we knew. The audience began to clap, hesitantly at first, then gradually swelling into a warm, resonant applause that filled the entire studio with something that felt like closure and healing. Whoopi glanced at Johnny again. I'll say this. I should have reached out. I should have made the first move back then. But I didn't know how. Johnny responded softly. Neither did I. Joy smiled. Well, looks like you figured it out today. The audience laughed gently, relieved. But then Johnny straightened, his demeanor shifting from emotional to reflective, calm, but carrying a gravity that demanded attention. There's something else I want to say, he murmured. Whoopi tensed slightly, as did the hosts, but Johnny raised a reassuring hand. No, not a confrontation. Just the truth. He turned his chair slightly, addressing the audience more directly. For years, he said, I've kept quiet. Not because I'm afraid. Not because I'm hiding anything. But because this business teaches you that the safest thing to do is to disappear. The studio leaned in. But today I realized something. Silence isn't healing. Silence is hiding. And I'm done hiding. The room erupted into applause. Whoopi touched her chest. Sarah wiped tears. Joy nodded with pride. Sunny pressed her hands together in quiet encouragement. Johnny continued, voice stronger now. They say celebrities shouldn't feel hurt. That fame protects you. That money protects you. That fans protect you. But none of that protects you from being human. The audience murmured in agreement. We bleed, he said. We break. We rebuild. And sometimes we return to the places that hurt us the most, not to reopen the wound, but to close it. Whoopi whispered, Thank you for coming back. Johnny nodded. Thank you for hearing me. And then, in a moment no one could have scripted, Whoopi stood up from her chair. Slowly, carefully, almost shyly. Johnny hesitated, but then he stood too. They met in front of the table. Two figures who had once symbolized a cultural divide but now stood inches apart, face to face, human to human, stripped of ego and history. Whoopi extended her arms. Johnny stepped forward. They embraced. Not a staged hug. Not a PR handshake. Not a temporary truce. A real embrace. The audience rose to their feet, bursting into applause so loud it echoed through the studio walls. People cried. People smiled. People held their phones up but forgot to press record. It was one of those rare moments where emotion overtook instinct. The host stood up, clapping. The producers behind the glass watched in stunned silence, knowing they had just captured something powerful, something rare, something unforgettable. When Johnny and Whoopi finally stepped back, both of them had tears in their eyes. Sunny whispered, This is history. The audience agreed with thunderous applause. Johnny returned to his seat. Whoopi wiped her eyes again and sat down slowly, her breath shaking a little. Joy tried to compose herself. Well, I think we can all agree that today wasn't the show we expected. Sarah laughed softly. But it was the show we needed. Sunny looked at Johnny, then at Whoopi. What happens now? Between the two of you? Johnny smiled gently. Now we move forward. Whoopi nodded. Yeah, forward. But the story didn't end in the studio. Within seconds after filming concluded, social media exploded. Clips spread like wildfire. Hashtag Johnny and Whoopi. Hashtag The View Moment. Hashtag Healing on Live TV. Hashtag Respect. Hashtag Stageview Drama. Journalists began drafting headlines before the cameras even cooled. Johnny Depp returns to The View in emotional confrontation. Whoopi Goldberg and Johnny Depp mend years-long rift live on air. The View airs most powerful interview in a decade. Twitter threads, reaction videos, think pieces, fan edits. They flooded the internet within minutes. Fans praised Johnny's vulnerability. Others commended Whoopi's accountability. Some debated the deeper implications of media responsibility and celebrity trauma. But overwhelmingly, people felt moved, seen, reminded that even the biggest stars carry wounds that don't fit into a headline. Backstage, Johnny prepared to leave the studio. The hallways buzzed with whispers, praise, astonishment. Crew members thanked him. Assistants nodded with admiration. Even producers looked grateful, humbled. As he approached the exit, Whoopi appeared behind him. Johnny, she called softly. He turned. She stepped closer. For what it's worth. I'm glad you came. He smiled. Me too. And maybe we can talk again sometime? She asked quietly. Johnny nodded. I'd like that. They exchanged a final look. Peaceful, respectful, human. Then Johnny stepped outside into the cool New York air. Camera flashes awaited him. Fans cheered. Reporters shouted questions. But Johnny didn't flinch. His shoulders were lighter. His steps steadier. Something inside him, some weight he had carried for years, had finally loosened. And as the wind rustled through his hair and the world buzzed with the aftermath of his return, Johnny Depp did something he hadn't done in a long time. He smiled. A real one. The kind that comes from healing. The kind that comes from closure. And as he walked away, his voice echoed not only in that studio, but across the world. And now it's your turn. What would you have done in Johnny's place? Do you think forgiveness was the right path? How did this moment make you feel? Tell us in the comments below. And if you want more explosive, emotional, cinematic stories just like this, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and share it with someone who loves real, powerful storytelling. Because moments like this don't happen often, and when they do, you feel them.